here with the amazing Alan Silvestri, of course, composer of, you don't even need an introduction anymore at this point in your career, I don't think. But, we're here to talk about Back to the Future, the musical, and the legacy of Back to the Future. But thank you, Al, so much for joining today.
Well, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to spend some time and visit with you.
Absolutely. So before we jump into Back to the Future, I want to kind of rewind a bit to last year, because you got to work with your friend Bob Zemeckis again on The Witches, which I really thought was a fantastic film, a really fun, adaptation. Can you just maybe walk through what was it like, again, continuing to work, your collaboration with Mr. Zemeckis and bringing that whole story to life?
Well, it's always amazing to work with Robert Zemeckis. I mean, he's an amazing artist, and he's an amazing collaborator, and he always has these most unique points of view to film and to storytelling. There was a lot to do on that film. We had to record it in the midst of the pandemic.
That's right.
I think it might have been the first full-size orchestra recording at Abbey Road in the midst of the pandemic, or since the pandemic had begun. Pete Cobham had worked very hard to devise a way to do this. And we wound up using both studios simultaneously. Of course, all the strings were in the big room, all social distanced. The whole thing was crazy.
Can't imagine.
But it was a magnificent sounding recording. Of course, everything took twice as long.
Yeah.
Because we had to do it. We actually had strings in the big room, woodwinds in the small room, and then we'd have brass in the big room and percussion in the small room. Or we might have done them together. And then, back and forth, back and forth. But it was an amazing experience, and Pete Cobham was brilliant with how he put this together, and then Dennis Sands mixed it. And we didn't know exactly how it would turn out, but it turned out to be a fantastic overall recording experience. So that was great.
Yeah, the score is brilliant as usual, and you add your flair to it, and it's so wonderful. So just speaking about Robert Zemeckis, as we talk about Back to the Future, I mean, you guys have worked together on almost every one of his features since, was it Romancing the Stone, I think was the first one?
It's been every one since Romancing.
So at this point in your career, looking at Witches and going all the way back to then, I think we talked about this in one of our past interviews, but I'd love to just kind of touch back on the subject. How has that relationship, I guess, evolved over these years? And as it got to the point, how does he direct you at this point versus, back then when you guys were much younger versus now? Does he have full trust in you, or how's that kind of collaboration work these days?
Well, Bob's always been as you would expect, he's always been full hands-on, and trusting someone. I think where that comes in is trusting someone in terms of their willingness to engage in the process enthusiastically, and knowing that there's a lot of love and respect and consideration. That being said, Mr. Zemeckis has to get things the way he wants them. And he's not shy about picking up the phone after I send something to him and going, "Hey, Al, I think you're 180 degrees off on this. It doesn't need to be this. It really needs to go in this direction." And then I go in that direction. So it's great because I never feel threatened by him. I never feel defensive, because I know he's he's got so much on his plate, so much pressure, so many forces that he actually protects me from.
Yeah.
I don't have to be out in the midst of that storm. He puts me off somewhere and makes sure I'm warm and snuggy and, well fed and happy. And then he goes out there and puts on his flak jacket and his raincoat and weathers the storm up on deck. And I do everything I can to help him. And that's the relationship, which has been unbelievable all these years.
It's amazing. Yeah, you guys have made such amazing work together on all the films that you've worked on. But talking about Back to the Future, which of course you just, congratulations on that musical finally opening after, I know it's been a long road to get that made. But looking back at the original film, when you scored Back to the Future, you were 36 years old. That's right. 2 years older than I am now. So I'm just curious. What are your memories of that time in your life? How did you feel working on that film? And did you have any, how did you start feeling when that movie took off and became the cultural phenomenon that it is today?
Well, I was 36 and I had done Romancing the Stone with Bob. So we had one of these movies under our belt. The demands musically for Back to the Future were very different. Romancing the Stone was more what they would say it was more in my wheelhouse. Let's put it that way. There was a lot of rhythm in it, rhythm section driven music. I was not someone who wrote for orchestra. As a matter of fact, I had only written one orchestral score maybe 6 months before Back to the Future, a little movie called Fandango. So it was completely terrifying. I was stressed beyond belief. It was a big studio picture, so there was all of that. But it turned out well. The movie did well. We had a little bit of a taste of success with Romancing. It was a successful film, but not on the level of Back to the Future. And so to be on that train was unbelievable, to wake up one day and see the centerfold of the Reporter and Variety. I don't know what the number was, but it might have been $115 million at the box office. It was incredible. And of course, then all you have is a hit movie. The iconic thing takes time, like a fine wine. It takes time for something to kind of move into that world. And so that was another amazing experience to see that movie go on in time. And then, of course, as you know, we wound up doing Back to the Future in concert.
Yes.
Where we got to go back, and revisit the movie. And more importantly, to sit in theaters, but now concert halls, not movie theaters, and opera houses with the orchestra and see the audience love that movie the way they had loved it 25 years before that was beyond thrilling. And then this musical is now, once again, Back to the Future, sitting in there with audiences loving Back to the Future. It's been incredible.
It's the characters stand the test of time. The story does, the themes of the movie, the energy, the comedy, the drama, everything, the romance, and the score, of course, your music. I mean, we talked about it, I think, and you were breaking down the theme for us and everything. But how did, I know this journey for this musical started a while ago, but how did you decide to get involved, and what was the process like when you finally began to start working on this and writing and working on this musical? What was it like for you to take a film that you didn't and adapt? Is this your first stage play adaptation?
Yeah, we had bits of it in Polar Express. We had musical numbers that had to be written ahead of time, and then they required choreography and adjustments, and then Bob shot to the music. This, of course, was a full-blown musical. It was Bob Zemeckis' wife, Leslie,
Yes, yeah.
probably 14 years ago now,
Yeah.
who casually dropped the bomb. Hey, what about Back to the Future, the musical? And it's like, yeah, what about that? Okay, let's have lunch. And that was the fateful lunch with Bob Gale, Bob Zemeckis, and Alan and Glen Ballard.
Right.
Now, Glen had worked with us, had worked with Bob and I on Polar Express. I don't know if we had done Christmas Carol at that point, but so Bob was very comfortable with Glen and loved his genius. And Bob Gale immediately fell in love with Glen and his genius. And it started at a lunch. What about this idea, Back to the Future? What does everybody think? And that's how we started. Where we got to quickly was, well, the movie, the story, the characters, it's all there.
Yeah.
So what isn't there is music. So you guys go write some music. And that's what Glen and I did. We were completely free to proceed as we thought fit. The guys were great like that. They didn't say, go write something for this and something for that. They said, go write some music and we'll have another lunch. And Glen and I picked a couple of spots in the story because, of course, there was no musical, there was no book, but there was some iconic, well, everything in the movie was iconic already, right?
Yeah.
So Glen and I thought, okay, how do we even start? Well, it's got to be an opening number. It's a musical.
Right.
So let's start with that. And we wrote an opening number. It's only a matter of time. That's not hard to figure out, right?
Right.
And then there were these other amazing, we felt very kind of stage-oriented bits in the original Back to the Future film. The family dinner is very theatrical. And we thought, let's write a song for the family dinner, and we're going to call it "Hello, Is Anybody Home?" And so we did that, and then we thought, well, let's maybe pick another place, and we went to that famous scene when Marty wakes up after he's hit by the car, and he wakes up in his mom's bedroom, and it's in 1955.
Yeah.
And so there's this, delicious kind of risque element to that scene because Lorraine is his mom.
Right.
She's already fallen in love with him, as we learn in the film. She's already put his pants on her hope chest, presumably while he was still unconscious. And he knows, hold on one second. He knows it's his mom. And so we wrote a song called Pretty Baby, which is having just a lot of fun with the fact that he's completely freaked out that this is his mom. And she's just like in love with him and trying to seduce him. So that's how we began. We wrote those three things. We called the Bobs. We went to see them. We had our lunch and we played these three things for them. And they were literally doubled over laughing. And we walked out that day going, Back to the Future can be a musical. That was 14 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
So a long circuitous path, but here we are. I mean, it's playing 8 shows a week at the Adelphi and in the West End. Audiences are loving it. We literally have a standing ovation pretty much after every performance.
Yeah, I can
8 shows a
imagine.
week. So it's been amazing, and it's all Back to the Future. So yeah, it's been incredible.
I mean, to have that finally complete. What was it? Did you find it challenging at all adapting? Did you have to adapt any of your score to fill in like periods of the play as well, and or the musical? And or was it kind of itching a different creative part of your brain to formulate these songs and kind of make it flow and everything?
Yeah, it's all a different kind of process in a sense. In some ways, in other ways, it's still storytelling with
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
We, Glenn and I, began by saying, okay, what do we have already? What we had already were some really great songs. We had The Power of Love,
Sure. Yeah.
Back in Time, Johnny Be Good,
Yep.
Earth Angel. So it's like, okay, we got that. And then we had the entire score to the movies, to all 3 movies, really, although
Yeah.
the musical is based on Back to the Future 1. But so these are all resources. Before we even started, then we had these 3 new songs we've done. So we started to go along. Bob Gale kind of took over the book writing side of life, and it was a real kind of collaboration, a give and take, a trial and error process.
Sure. Yeah.
Went on for a long time. There were songs written that never made it into the show. There were songs written at the very last minute before we opened in Manchester. And in terms of adapting score, we always thought it would be interesting. Fun's a kind of an interesting word. It's not none of it's really fun, but it's interesting, it's challenging and
Yeah,
worthwhile. But we thought it would be really great if we could bring a little sense of underscore to a musical. And then the question is, how do you actually do that? Now, what we did wind up doing, which is amazing, is we're doing the clock tower sequence on stage with a real DeLorean and all the rest of it. And it's amazing how it's been staged. Our effects genius, our lighting genius, everything, our director genius, John Randall. So we got to do that, and we have a magnificent band, and then we did some very creative programming, and we're doing, you get to see Marty go back to 1955 from 1985, and it's a big deal. And then you get to see something very special at the very end of the show involving the DeLorean. So yeah, we kind of said, let's do it all. Let's do it all.
That's amazing. So, I mean, looking back at, we mentioned that, you started this Back to the Future towards the beginning of your career, and you've seen it now evolve into a stage musical. You've gone back and worked and, helped approve all these new remasters and releases of the scores. When you look back at it and you're still working at it now in your career and like readapting and reworking, rearranging, do you ever look back at the music and go, are you like critical about your old work? Do you look back and go, oh, I would have done things differently that I knew now? Do you look back at it and go, oh, I love what I did there? Like, are you nostalgic for the work you've done in the past, or?
Well, I kind of have an acid test that will answer that, I believe. And the acid test was Back to the Future in concert. When that idea appeared, and that appeared from Mike Gorfain and Jamie Richardson. They approached me about that and said, hey, we've started this new company and we think Back to the Future would be fantastic as an in-concert property. He said, but there's only one problem. I said, yeah, what's that, guys? And he said, there's not enough music in it. And I go, oh, so, well, then I guess it's not going to work. Yeah, they said, well, yeah, it wouldn't work the way it is, but what if you were to write more music? I said, so you're asking me about writing more music to what's considered a legendary near perfect movie. And they said, well, yeah, I mean, we're kind of asking that. And I said, well, okay, so who's going to kind of talk to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale about this? Well, we thought maybe you could talk to them about that if you think it's a good idea. So as it turned out, I happened to be having dinner with both of those guys together the very night I'm having this conversation.
Wow.
And I waited till after my Caesar salad. And I finally got up the nerve and I said, hey guys, here's a crazy idea. I was approached about it in concert. Only thing is, there's not enough music. And they're like, yeah, so? I said, well, the guys want me to write more music. And they said, well, so write it. I mean, it blew my mind how both of the Bobs were so willing to allow something here involving their movie. And they were both so fantastic. They were like, wait a second, if people want to see what we did, then they go to a movie theater. This is a whole other world. This is a live orchestra on stage in a concert hall. It's not going to be the perfect mix of the movie. That's not the place to go to see what we did. It's the place to go see what this is. And they said, you do whatever you have to do to make that a wonderful experience in the concert hall. So I'm getting to the answer of your question here. So I thought, what an opportunity of a lifetime. I get to go revisit that score. I can write new music. I've learned a few things in the last 25 years, and I can go and have fun. Here's that word again. I can have fun with that. And what I found was it was inappropriate to change basically a note of anything. Wow. So I went, we took material, we tracked it around. Jeff Carson was a magnificent help with all of that. And we had a number. We knew we had to add about 20 minutes of additional music. And we did it, and I didn't change any of it. And I didn't want to. And it wasn't like there were mistakes in there or anything. Right. But I just felt, we shouldn't change this stuff. It is what it is, and it should be what it is. Right. And we did have to adapt it from the point of view of the size of the ensemble. Sure. Because we had a humongous orchestra for Back to the Future. And we weren't going to have that as Back to the Future in concert traveled around to various symphony orchestras. So we did have to adapt that. Mark Graham was very helpful with a lot of that work. But I didn't feel the need to change the original ideas, orchestrations, settings. It was pure Back to the Future, just the way it was. And it was interesting. I was surprised. I could have done whatever I wanted. And I did not want to change any of it.
I think I agree with that too, because it's almost like you'd be tampering with the past, almost like you had an opportunity to go back and change yourself from the past, if so,
Yeah,
getting into meta Back to the Future
sure.
thing, but
Yeah,
and rewriting history and almost kind of changing, like, oh, and adapting yourself to whatever you are now. But I kind of, because it's like you look at a photograph, you can't really jump into a photograph and change it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And the best compliment I've gotten about Back to the Future in concert has come from people who know the movie rather well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't realize that we've added 20 minutes of music to the movie.
Mhm.
They go, well, wait a second, that was always there, right? It's like, no, it was not always there. There was never music under the credits in the opening of this. Well, and that music in the, the dinner with Lorraine is like, that was always there, right? No, that was not always there. So, I think that's also part of the advantage of not going in there and messing with the original palette. It's all of the fabric of Back to the Future, and it's not jarring or doesn't feel weird.
Right. Yeah.
I wrote one cue in the entire Back to the Future in concert. It was the little play off at the end of the first act before intermission, where Lorraine says, Marty goes flying by on the skateboard, and she says, I don't know. Somebody says, who is that? And she says, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And there's like 2 bars of this little motor motif.
Mm-hmm.
2 bars, maybe 4 bars of just this little string motor. That's the only thing that was written, quote unquote, for that project. So yeah, it's wild.
That's amazing. I mean, in Burbank, on Victory Boulevard, there's still the Burger King from that. I always call it the Back to the Future Burger King when we go pick up drive through there, and that's I'm like, Marty's house was right here. Like, there's no garage
exactly.
here, but
exactly.
And then, of course, going to the back lot and seeing that they still kept that, Back to the Future Square pretty much is kind of there still.
Yeah, it's a classic piece of real estate.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just to wrap up a little bit, we talk about Back to the Future, but you have also another kind of classic that has developed over the years. Of course, Polar Express. It's that time of year now, and Polar Express has become this great tradition for families to gather around and watch. And
right.
And how does? I mean, again, you have another. I think any composer, or filmmaker, or storyteller would love to have a holiday classic, in their repertoire. So how do you feel having that, watching that film kind of take its journey into this world?
It's amazing. Justin Freer has taken that and has been doing the Polar Express in concert.
Cineconcerts. Justin.
Yeah. And we went to the first one up in Vancouver, which was it was probably 2 years ago now. Well, no, it was 2 years ago. And Bob Zemeckis flew in, and the audience loved it. It was fantastic. As recent as yesterday, I went into my granddaughter's kindergarten class. Yesterday afternoon, it was Polar Express Day at her school. The kids saw the movie before I got there, and I had 60 kindergartners in a gym. And we were talking about the Polar Express, and they knew everything in the movie. So, those kinds of things they're amazing to have in your professional life. And that has become this kind of perennial, it's something I've heard from so many people. It's not Christmas for my family until we all sit and watch the Polar Express. And that kind of thing is amazing.
And you get to share it with your granddaughter too. I mean, that must have been really special. I mean,
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm all of a sudden, I'm her hip hop. She called me Mr. Pop.
Mr. Pop. That's a perfect name.
Yeah, because they want to be formal when they ask you a question. Mr. Pop.
Mr.
What was
Pop,
it
what is?
like? Yeah, so it's all pretty great.
Well, Mr. Pop, I want to thank you so much for joining us, or joining me today, and for everyone watching. And I'm happy to be able to close out the year talking with you, Al. It's been a while, and it's great to see you. And I'll be enjoying some of your beloved wine this holiday season as well.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, look, it's always a pleasure for me. You love what I do, not me personally, all of us who do this. You love the art form of music for film, and it's just a pleasure to talk to you about it. You always have, such a great understanding of what we're all trying to do here. It's an absolute pleasure. So have a great holiday, and enjoy the wine.